Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. Simi Awujo over the line to Manchester United. We are getting busy at this window. Mariam is back with me for another player profile. The last time you were on, it was a Dominic Janssen one, the first sign of the window. So we're now up to signing number 5 as well as we go into this transfer window. It's getting busy. It's getting busy as we progress through this one. First question then, you know it's coming. I have asked everyone this question as we go through this one. Just your thoughts on the move now it's fully completed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty thrilled for Simi Awujo to now sign her first professional contract. I think she's been a player that has impressed across the youth stages, the U20 FIFA Women's World Cup, which is what prompted her to have that senior cap, and she's gone on and done amazingly well with a senior team that has a fair bit of competition, I think, in the midfield when you're talking about a player who's not even a professional. Across the months and even last year, she's kind of overtaken Julia Grosso as the preferred kind of double pivot midfielder, depending on who they're starting with, if it's Quinn or Jessie Fleming. But yeah, I mean, she's a player that is brilliant, and I think she deserves to showcase her skills and at a professional level. And gone are the collegiate soccer days now. It's on to professional football, and yeah, I mean, I'm pretty thrilled for a Canadian to make this overseas move. I think that's always a joy when we see that happen. And for it to be at the WSL, I think it's a great exposure moment. And, I think United is a club that can offer her a lot in terms of game time and it being a good development moment. And I'm sure we'll jump into that pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, you got to be thrilled for a player like her to sign her first professional contract. And yeah, I think she's going to surprise a lot of people who have not been following her maybe for as many years as I think some of the other Canadian fans.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned Gross as well. That was another player that United have been linked to over the last couple of years. So you saying that she's potentially overtaken her in the national team squad is music to my ears when you're talking about that and a move potentially there as well. For people who maybe don't know, obviously, a bit about her then, where would you say her best position is?
She's a defensive midfielder, but has also shown, I think she's a great defensive midfielder, but has also been able to offer your regular holding midfielder skills of possibly putting in these last minute threaded passes, connecting really well. And I think what we've seen, in the past few months is that she's adding to her skill set of that last runner in the box. And so if there's a bit of a deflection, if there's a corner that's not being cleared, she's positioned herself in a pretty good position to be able to get that last rebound. And so that's something she's added to her skill set as well. But she's a defensive midfielder, plays pretty well in a double pivot situation. That's kind of the Canadian setup that she's been in. With college, it's a little bit different. You often see her as a lone midfielder, kind of as a single one holding in the back. I mean, she's done brilliantly well there. And I think the fact that she's been able to work with two different setups of both the senior level with the Canadian national team, but also the NCAA in college has added to that. And so I think what you most likely be able to see of her, of a defensive midfielder, but she has the qualities of a midfielder that can advance play a little bit. And, I'm sure we'll jump into her toolbox a little bit more as well, but she's quite a fun player. And I think probably on the other channel here, when we talked a little bit about Canada and you told me who's a player that we should watch out for, I gave you a few names, and one of them was Simi Awujo, because she's such a bright talent. And if whoever was following during the Olympics probably saw a lot of that. But yeah, great player, extremely reliable, starts games. And if she's not starting games, I think she's always been an impact sub off the bench. So defensive midfielder is where you're likely see her playing in, but I think that versatility can add to in case there's injuries in the squad that United are looking to rotate a little bit.
No, absolutely. And I think defensive midfield is certainly a position that we lacked. I think when we were looking at midfielders and everyone was like, we need midfielders. And I think you're looking at Grace Clinton coming back in, obviously from a loan. Emma Watson, who was out for all of last season. She's going to be another option in midfield. Mia Zhao, Lisa Nelson, and Altun are already there, and Hayley Ladd as well. You don't necessarily need more players in that advanced midfield role. Obviously, I know we lost Katie Zellum and Guerrero over the summer, but I don't. With Grace coming back and Emma coming back, I don't think you need another one of those. It was the more deeper lying midfielders that I wanted to see, because I don't want to see Lisa Nelson there. I don't want to see Grace Clinton back there either. So I'm glad that we've got somebody else who can do that role a little bit more as well. And you spoke a bit about her attributes and things like that. You called it a toolbox, and I'm hoping there's a lot of tools in this box that you're going to reel off now in terms of what you think her standout attributes are, again, for people who maybe haven't watched her.
She's really, No, she's really calm on the ball. And I think that's what I like about her is that she plays that mature kind of football where she is quite calm, but she's not, a professional player just yet. Certainly is now. But she shows a mature style of play, which is, I think impressive for a player who has not been in a professional environment every other week. And so she's calm on the ball. I think her hustle ability is something that you need of a midfielder. She's hustling to get the ball if she loses it, and she's tracking really well. That we saw against France very brilliantly. She was in the midfield hustling. She was behind the ball, going after it. And then when she got the ball, and it was a moment of, a bit of a chaos when France were pressing and you had Katoto coming at you. You need to be calm in there. And so she's calm. She picks out her passes, and she's a hustler that will come back and put in close in the distance between the opposition as the ball. She's going to put it in a tackle, and she's a hustler that comes back. So I don't think you can ever question heart when it comes to Simi Awujo, because she shows a lot of it. But I mean, defensive qualities in terms of that, she knows her awareness situation. She's able to communicate well, I think, from what we've seen in the Canadian setup of if there's runners behind her teammates, she's able to call that out. And it's just quick. She's calm when she needs to be, but she's also quick in moving the ball off the transition quite nicely. And that's something that she's also added, recently into her style of play. And I think I've also had the privilege to speak to her a few times after the Canada games here at home. And she's always talked about how that speed and physicality of that professional game has been the biggest change for her. And I think if you assess her first cap for the international team to now, you can tell she's adapted really, really well to the speed of the game. It's about now building physicality, which is something you'd expect with a young player like her just coming out of college. That bulking process is going to come over time. But she's adapted really well to the speed of the game, which I would say is because of her awareness of knowing when to slow the play down and be calm and mature in how she progresses the ball, but also knowing when to quickly pass on the ball and help on the transition. And so you can kind of sometimes already tell her best qualities from what she has said about the game. And I think that makes her a really special player for how young she is.
No, absolutely. It's definitely. It sounds like all the things that United are missing currently in the midfield as well. I think when you're looking at where we lost out, I think in games last season, it's definitely those elements that you just mentioned. I'm going to come on to her in terms of where her potential minutes are going to come from in just a second, whether we think she's going to start and things like that. But who do you think she's going to link up well with? Because I always like asking this question, because when you're looking at new signings coming in, you need those partnerships on the pitch, particularly in midfield. We see a lot of double pivot situations, particularly at United. Mark Skinner does like to have that kind of pair. We saw Zellum and Ladd be the pair 2 seasons ago. Last season, it was Zellum and Nelson that seemed to be that kind of pair, the favoured choice that he would go to in a lot of games. Who do you think she's going to link up well with in terms of individual players at United that you've watched, or do you think there's a type of player that she kind of needs to play alongside?
I think she likes to play with fast moving players, so like a Jessie Fleming, for example. And I think it's maybe that is a bit of a biased question, because that is the preferred partnership that we have seen her be in. Not often does she start with Quinn in the midfield. I don't think we've really seen many minutes with her and Julia Grosso. It's been a lot of her and Jessie Fleming. And Jessie Fleming is, I think a lot of WSL folks are familiar with her, but she's fast. She looks for a pass quickly. So I think you'd kind of compare that a little bit to Grace Clinton, who maybe will have to play not a deeper role. Like, you're not seeing her as an attacker, I don't think, with United, but them two bouncing off each other and paralleling their runs, where perhaps Grace is making that forward run and then Awujo's right behind her. I think you might see a lot of that. I think the fact that they're both two young players is going to be exciting. So I think maybe that's a bit of a biased answer, because that's the kind of partnership that we've seen her combine with Canada. I think that's a fun midfield that's going to give some trouble for other players. That she's quite quick as well, so she can, make a good run from behind. So I'd give it to Grace Lincoln, but I mean, it's not like United are short of players that she can connect with. Ella Toon, I think that's going to be fun. Are we finally going to get to see a consistent season of Ella Toon where she's on her A game every single game, doing what she needs to do in the midfield? Maybe it's a player like Awujo behind her who brings that. That's going to be exciting. I'm obviously very excited to see her continue to combine with Jade Riviere. Both players fresh out of college heading to United. So maybe perhaps United are keeping an eye on these Canadians that are in college. But yeah, it's probably some of these players, and obviously it's going to be Maya Leticia and Millie Turner perhaps from behind, and that's going to be fun as well. Awujo has played in front of pretty great, massive center backs of the likes of Vanessa Gilles and Kadisha Buchanan, so she knows what it means to play with and in front of experienced players. Obviously, a Maya Leticia or Millie Turner is not your Kadisha Buchanan or Vanessa Gilles, but she'll bring that perhaps to them as well, which is what you might see of she's going to bring in some qualities to help the United team, and they're going to also, she's still a developing player. She's also one of the players that were, the product of Christine Sinclair, and so you're going to bring in a player that has a mentality like that in the last few bits came under the wings of Christine Sinclair. She scored her first international goal in BC, and when they were doing that Christine Sinclair window retirement, so maybe she'll bring in some of that energy, and hey, it's going to be exciting.
No, I think from that point of view, you mentioned Jade. I think that'll probably help her as well, settle in a little bit. Not that I guess the cultures are too different in terms of moving from Canada. I don't know. I've never made that jump. But obviously, being a younger player herself, moving to a team where if she didn't know anybody and things like that, obviously that can be a little bit daunting for younger players making that jump. Obviously, she already knows Jade over there as well, so there's going to be that. I think that will help her settle a little bit quicker. And that kind of leads me into my next kind of question. We've spoken about game time at the start of this and things like that. Obviously, Hayley Ladd is our only other, in my opinion, defensive midfielder that we've got. We spoke about Janssen before, that she has played there before. I don't want to see her there personally. I would rather see her in the back line. Can you see her starting over Hayley Ladd going into next season? Because it's a strange one. For me, Hayley Ladd is definitely the best defensive midfielder we've got at the club in that position at the moment. But we didn't see it last season. She fell out of favour. And like I said, Nelson and Zelen was the two that Mark obviously went for in pretty much every game towards the back end of the season. Can you see her starting over a Hayley Ladd, or do you think it's going to be kind of those minutes coming off the bench? Where do you kind of see her game time next season?
I feel like that game time is going to be shared between them. I think it would be pretty unfair and just inaccurate to say in the first 10 games she's definitely going to start 6 or definitely going to start 7 over Hayley Ladd. I think that's just too inaccurate to say. But I think maybe progressively as we continue to see the fixtures rack up of the FA Cup and the Conti Cup and all those start to slide in when the schedule really heats up, I feel like it wouldn't be too wild to say that she starts. I think we see that with Canada for a reason. Not many big players get to start against the likes of France who have to cover Grace Gior, for example, or Tilletti in there. And so she's a player that can do that. And it wouldn't be a wild statement to say that, yeah, maybe potentially down the line she could be stealing those starts. But I feel like those minutes are going to be shared between the two, which is good. You gotta manage load. She's not a player that has played every single week of professional football, so she too is going to have to work around some adjustments of minutes and knowing how to load her minutes. And you don't want her to be injury riddled either. We've seen that with Jade Riviere, and that's not what you want to have with Simi. So I kind of see Simi as a helper, kind of bouncing on the back of Hayley Ladd, and maybe we'll see them share those minutes down the line when the schedule heats up. But I think it's going to be exciting. Also, to mention quickly, she doesn't even live in Canada, so maybe she'll I guess have to maybe tullis-joyce and work with how her move here from the US. She is American born, lives in California, born in Atlanta, could have represented Nigeria, represented Canada through parental. So that's going to be, she's going to be bringing a lot of culture there, which is going to be fun. But yeah, I feel like the move is going to be fairly similar to Jade's, of both of them leaving collegiate soccer in the US and then going straight to Manchester with that.
No, absolutely. You're leading me on so nicely into my next question, because I got a bit of a thing about this on the last show in terms of, and I know people don't like this phrasing, but it's the only phrasing I can think of using in terms of adaptation to the WSL. Obviously, as we mentioned, still as a young player kind of coming through there as well. We spoke a little bit about this before we start recording. What do you think she maybe needs to work on to adapt to the WSL? Or do you think she's already ready for the WSL and can hit the ground running?
I think she can hit the ground running. And I think, obviously, when we see this move and anything around a youngster coming into the squad with a lot of potential, not even a youngster, a player that can actually add really significant momentum into the team, but then the season goes on and they really haven't gotten a fair shot or a fair chance or a fair number of minutes because Mark Skinner saying, well, they need to adapt to the team and they need to adapt to the WSL, I think you steal a lot of the potential and the momentum that these players are coming in with. So personally, it'd be extremely frustrating to if that narrative happens again, of actually she's a youngster, we need to see her, you know, work around this, and that, where she's not getting a fair shot on the field at all. With the Canadian team, she had to rack up her minutes. She had to sharpen up her calm football, not lose possession as often as maybe she did when she first started. She needed to sharpen the fact that she also needed to add to her, you know, box of tools of being that late runner to catch a last shot off a corner. Like, she's added, and I think when a player this young has been able to sharpen and continue to improve this quickly, it tells you that they're a bit of a malleable sort of player that can continue to improve and add. And that addition and that extra work is done in training. And so perhaps the training is where Mark Skinner should be hoping to see those adaptations, not, you know, give her 2 minutes each game and say 78 more minutes to see if she can actually, you know, earn a start. I think that would be very frustrating for her development. And also, she's become a really prominent player for the Canadian team now, so I would also want her to be getting her minutes into her legs as well. So frustratingly, I don't want to see her sit on the bench and be a bench warmer and play once every month. That won't be good, I don't think, for the team. The team then won't really be getting the most out of her, I don't think, with what she's got to offer. And she also wouldn't be developing as well as she wants to, as well as the United team wants to. So, you know, no player comes in knowing that they're going to play all these minutes. They got to earn it, and that happens in training. And when a player like her is earned to start against or alongside the captain of Jessie Fleming, and has been a product of Christine Sinclair, I don't think you really doubt how good their training is, because they will show up and train.
No, absolutely. And particularly when you're talking about development, things like that, these players need game time. Obviously, we know in the WSL there's not a boatload of games. You can't afford to rotate all the time, especially at a team like Man United. And Mark Skinner will know this for his own job. Obviously, he's only got a 1-year contract at the moment. He needs to get into the top 3 if he's going to have any chance of some kind of renewal at the end of next season. So he knows that he's going to have to pick the team that he trusts the most to get the wins. However, I think you've always got to look at individual player development as well, because that'll only help you in the long run. And I think you look at the signings that United have made this window in Sandberg, obviously Simi, and Turland in particular. These are younger players that are going to grow and obviously develop with us, and I hope are here for the long term. And you can throw Grace Clinton and Emma Watson into that mix as well, players that are coming back into the side as well. So there's a lot of good young players there that are going to need minutes. You can't just let them rot on the bench with limited minutes, because they're never going to develop. I think we saw with Hayley Lads, going slightly off topic, but she kind of fell out of the team last season, didn't get as many minutes, and then the recent, like a month or so ago when Wales had their qualifiers and friendlies that they played, she looked well off the pace, and that's because she's just not played. You know, for the back end of the United season, she wasn't playing, went straight into the Wales camp, and I thought looked off it a bit. And I think that's part of the reason I don't want to see the same thing happen here, as we have seen with potential other players as well. Bringing the positivity back, though, for the last kind of 2 final questions on her, in terms of how high you think her ceiling is. Obviously, I say this on every show, potential is hard to predict, because obviously injuries and game time and career paths and all that kind of thing. But how high, with a clean run of games and all that kind of thing, where do you think her kind of ceiling is?
She's great. She was one of the few youngsters that went to the World Cup alongside Olivia Smith, who, I mean, we've seen how good Olivia Smith has been, and that was only a year ago. So you can put Simi in that boat of, right, she nodded that flight ticket to Australia for a reason. That tells you enough. And again, I remember back then the reaction was like, who's this 19-year-old Olivia Smith who is not even playing professional soccer? Very similar to Simi Awujo. I mean, look, what a year and a half, not even a year. It hasn't even been a year since the World Cup kind of, well, it has been now. But look how far Olivia Smith has gone. And I wouldn't be surprised to see if Simi Awujo follows the same. She's got the potential. I think she's got the right support system in California, and her family. She speaks pretty, you know, cutely about them and the support that she's had around her. And I think that the Canadian teammates around her have also spoken very highly of her. With a young player like that who's getting signed right after college and has already gone to World Cups and Olympics before actually being a pro, it tells you a lot, and it tells you a lot about their potential. And I think I rate her very highly, and I'm, again, very excited to see her take that professional step. Sure, there'll be obstacles around the way. I mean, who doesn't face some obstacles when they're going as a pro player? But if she's treated well and she's nurtured well in terms of development, game time, bulking up, all those other extra things that need to come with an excellent player, I think you're looking at a fabulous Canadian midfielder who's going to do some damage in there and is going to deliver on what she needs to. She gets the assignment done, basically, and has been able to get the assignment done. So she is a player that has a really high ceiling, and I'm excited to see that hopefully develop at United. But, questions around that as usual.
Well, fingers crossed, because as I just mentioned a few of the players in the last bit there about the players that if they hit their potential, like I said, I don't know. Like I said, potential is hard to predict, but if they do, it is incredibly high and exciting for the future, that's for sure. And I think it's just exciting for now. I think if she does get game time and minutes in there, I'm excited to see what she can offer, something maybe a little bit different in there as well. My last one then, if you can rate the signing out of 10, where are you placing this one? I think you gave Janssen an 8 when you were on the last one, so I'm intrigued to see where you put this one for Simi.
A 9, perhaps. She was a few months ago, she was pretty adamant on the fact that she wanted to finish her uni degree. That's gone out the window. And I wouldn't be surprised to hear or know that she had a lot of clubs after her. The fact that she chose a team that maybe is not in the Champions League, so you're not necessarily, jumping straight into crazy European football. You're taking it as a team, and hopefully her agent has had negotiations with the fact that she is going to get to play. United need a player like her. I think she actually brings exact qualities that United have lacked last season, and given the departures, specifically of Katie Zellum, I think she brings a lot of that. And hopefully if United are able to, again, and more so Mark Skinner, are able to give her those elements that fit her development, it's fantastic for her as well. So this is kind of a bit of a win-win situation. Hopefully she's not training in portables. That wouldn't be too fun. But obviously that's not the situation, won't be the situation. But yeah, I feel like this is a great step for her in her professional career. She's not going in for a big dog of a Barca or a Chelsea or X, Y, and Z, or not to say that these are the only big dogs in the game, but, kind of similar examples. Yeah, she's a smart girl, was doing a pretty good degree. Won, in 2022, she won the Young Player Award. That's an award that Jessie Fleming has won. That's an award that Jade Rose has won. Jade Rose is a player who's also caught a lot of eyes in this Olympics. So she's been in an award. Jade Rose is even that. Revere, has won that award. So it's almost like whoever does win that award goes on to do some pretty good things. And so this professional England, that's a pretty win-win situation for both parties here.
No, fingers crossed on that one. There's some good players that you listed there. I like that. That one. Obviously, as you mentioned, obviously on the Awful Women's Football channel. If people who would have seen that Olympics preview that we did, Simi was one of the players you said when I asked you about a player to keep an eye on. Simi was that player before anyone was talking about her from a United point of view. That was the name that we threw at you as a potential one to keep an eye on. So. And
actually, I kind of drew a pretty, far-fetched. I wouldn't even say far-fetched, but I drew in a pretty. Because Connor was like, right, who's kind of a similar player to her, and honestly, I feel like she's a bit of a Kim Little. Obviously Kim is in a legendary status of her own, and rightfully so. But if there's a player that I can see 7 years down the line that would have a reputation like that, it could be a little bit of a Simi Awujo. So maybe I was a time reader a few weeks back, but yeah, like following her for the past 2-3 years has been great. And like I mentioned, she's I've spoken to her a few times after the Canada games, and yeah, she's a pretty good package.
Yeah, that's a good little way to end off this player profile. And another reason for you to keep an eye on Manchester United for next season, 2 Canadians now, as we had a couple of seasons ago, obviously when Adriana Leon was over here.
Yeah, well,
for that brief time we had 2 Canadians in the team. Those kind of 4 or 5 months on that one. So yes, ones to look forward to now. So really excited. Where can people find all your work, obviously, and things like that? 'Cause obviously you cover a lot, and at the time of recording this, obviously we're kind of still mid-Olympics. But there's obviously a lot going on around Canada right now that you've done obviously videos on as well. So if people haven't watched those, where can people find all of that?
Yeah, everything is at She Scores Bangers on Twitter. You'll see some of my writing. I write for a few different outlets, so a good Canadian focus there, but also like to give some the international eyes. So that's where you'll find all the writing and other coverage. Other than that, She Scores Bangers on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and like Connor mentioned, if you want to hear a little bit more about the Canada scandal and how far deep it goes, maybe more than what you've read, certainly a few of the last episodes cover all of that. And yeah, hopefully no more drone scandals anytime soon.
No, absolutely. It's definitely worth the watch on those two. I tweeted one off my account, the first video that she did over there. So it's definitely worth the watch. So make sure you go in and following everything that Miriam's doing over there. Make sure you like in this video, subscribe it if you are new around here, and all that good stuff. We're on our road to 3K now, so it'd be much appreciated. It's free. Just hit the subscribe. That's it. That's all you've got to do. We're not asking for anything else on that one. So make sure you're doing all that kind of thing, and we should see you guys in the next one.